Welcome to the Playing Books podcast.
Today, we are taking on something genuinely complex, really densely layered, and just completely enthralling. We're doing an extended exploration of a single book.
A true masterclass in psychological tension and unreliable narration. We're talking about the novel Never Lie by Freida McFadden.
That's the one, and it just grabs you from the very first page.
It really does. So for you, our curious listener, our mission in this episode isn't just to, summarize the plot, which is a twisty, wild ride in itself, but to really pull back the curtain on why this narrative works so well. This is an exploration of the mechanics of deception. It's about understanding how lies, psychological manipulation, and just plain self-interest are weaponized at every single turn by people who seem, on the surface, completely ordinary.
And the book doesn't ease you into this theme at all. It establishes the concept of what you could call universal deceit, right from the prologue. The very first thing we read is a reference to a specific psychological experiment.
The broken vending machine study. Okay, let's unpack this little scenario because it really is the philosophical foundation for the entire book. What were the conditions of this experiment? What was the unsettling conclusion that really sets the stage for the whole world we're about to enter?
Well, the setup was elegantly simple. A vending machine was rigged. So after you put $1 in to get your candy, it would spit the dollar right back out.
So free candy, basically.
Effectively, yes. Free candy. The subjects knew there was a malfunction because they got their money back, but there was also a way for them to report the defect.
And the shocking takeaway, the little nugget of knowledge that Freida McFadden uses to launch us into this dark world.
Zero people reported the malfunction.
Wow, not one.
Not a single person. Every single person who used it took the free candy and just moved on. So the premise is laid bare immediately. Everybody lies. Or maybe more accurately, everybody prioritizes their own self-interest and convenience over some abstract idea of morality.
And that forces us, as the readers, to immediately start questioning the motives and the morality of every single character we're about to meet.
Yeah, that insight, that moral compromise is universal. It's reinforced by the central figure, Adrienne Hale. She's the brilliant, maybe a little arrogant psychiatrist who wrote the best-selling pop psychology book, The Anatomy of Fear.
And her house, this isolated mansion, becomes the epicenter of the whole story. She claims that she, as a trained professional, can spot the lies that other people miss.
Right. She outlines all the tells of, unskilled liars, the classic fidgeting, the sudden change in their voice, the halting speech patterns. But what's really critical is her note that liars often fall into this trap of offering too much information.
Over-explaining.
Exactly. Babbling on with excessive detail to convince themselves or others of what they're saying.
And that excessive detail, that over-explaining, it becomes the blueprint for the entire book's structure, doesn't it? It's the signature of the unreliable narrator. And Adrienne is so confident in her system. She claims she's more accurate than the best lie detector, which she says has a 25% error rate.
But that's the ironic foreshadowing right there. Her arrogance, her certainty that she can identify and control deception is the first sign that her system is deeply flawed. It's the thing that's going to cause her own undoing.
She believes she's above the universal deceit she diagnoses in everyone else.
Precisely.
So over this extended episode, we're going to dissect all the main players, Trisha, Ethan, Adrienne, Luke, EJ, and the insidious Patricia. And we'll analyze the psychological principles Adrienne talks about, like narcissism, rejection, pain, and manipulation, and see how they are used not for therapy, but for leverage and ultimately murder.
It's a dark road.
It is. So let's begin where the book does, in that physical discomfort and isolation that breeds immediate paranoia. We jump straight into the crisis. We can call it the present-day terror, focusing on the newlyweds, Trisha and Ethan.
Right. We meet them 6 months into their marriage, and they're driving to view this remote, sprawling, kind of elegant house in Westchester. But the journey itself is the first sign that something is very wrong.
Absolutely. The setting is just crucial for escalating the tension right away. They're relying on, of all things, archaic written directions because the GPS failed.
A classic literary move to isolate them digitally. And the weather. What starts as quaint, light snow quickly turns into a full-blown blizzard.
And their car, Ethan's sleek, expensive BMW, is completely unsuited for this. It has those beautiful leather seats that Trisha loves, but it's only front-wheel drive. And Ethan is clearly not skilled at driving on these slippery roads. He's constantly having to correct these skids.
And this is where we get the first real contrast in Ethan's character. Trisha observes his stubbornness. When he insists he didn't miss a turn, she sees a scary-looking vein bulges in his neck.
Oof.
Yeah, he is rigid, he's controlling, and he's prone to this kind of explosive denial.
But then, almost immediately, he flips and embodies the perfect husband trope. He's romantic, he's attentive, loyal. He's prepared for the snow in his boots and ski jacket, while Trisha is freezing in her impractical, stylish boots.
And when the path gets too difficult, he gives her this chivalrous piggyback ride to the front door.
It's that duality. The loving perfection wrapped around this core of stubborn anger. That's the first huge red flag the narrative just hands to you.
They finally see the house, and it's immense. The listing says 2 stories and an attic, but Trisha sees it as a Gothic cathedral. Steep gable roofs, pointed arch windows, just scraping the sky.
And it looks ridiculously, prohibitively expensive. Ethan even says it should be worth 4 times as much as the very low asking price.
And Trisha's reaction isn't awe or excitement. It's visceral fear. Before they even get the door open, this powerful, almost psychic, sick feeling comes over her.
A premonition.
A strong premonition that something terrible has happened in this house. And she immediately starts hoping for mold or foundation issues, anything practical to justify saying no instead of admitting this deep, irrational fear she's feeling.
And that feeling immediately gets backed up by physical evidence.
Yeah.
The realtor, Judy, is a no-show. Trisha notes that Judy, who keeps houses immaculate, would never have left an upstairs light on.
Right, and then the way they get in, Ethan finds a key hidden under a potted plant. It's not in a lockbox. It's deliberately concealed, like someone wanted to be able to enter secretly.
The moment they step inside, the isolation and the sheer size of the place, museum-level enormous, it gives way to the ultimate tension builder.
The sign of fresh human presence.
And this is where the author uses the most mundane detail to just escalate the dread.
The half-full glass of water next to the kitchen sink, dripping with condensation. You have to think about why that works so well. The rest of the house is dusty, empty, clearly vacant. The fresh condensation proves someone was there just minutes, maybe hours before them.
Exactly. Ethan tries for immediate denial, probably Judy, but Trisha's panic is fully realized. She says, I think there's somebody else in this house. It's that contrast between the stillness of the vacuum and the evidence of recent life that makes it so terrifying.
So Ethan, taking control, grabs the largest serrated carving knife from the kitchen block.
The first weapon.
The first weapon is introduced, and it immediately puts you on edge. They start this tour of dread, checking all 6 bedrooms, and the evidence just keeps mounting.
In the master closet, Trisha finds a really crucial detail, a white cashmere sweater. And Trisha thinks no woman, especially not the wealthy Dr. Hale, would willingly leave behind such an expensive, luxurious piece of clothing.
So to Trisha, the conclusion is concrete and terrifying.
The owner must be dead.
Right. And then comes the visual representation of the house's ghost, the gigantic life-sized portrait of Adrienne Hale, MD, PhD.
With the pin-straight red hair and those vivid green eyes. Trisha feels like those eyes are boring into me, even from across the room.
Her presence is just so imposing, both as the former resident and as the author of the chilling book they find in her office.
That office, the scene of Adrienne's professional life, is where they find a shelf full of her books, all titled The Anatomy of Fear. And Trisha notices the cover art, a dripping knife.
And of course, the book centers on the story of a trauma survivor. And it's common knowledge that Adrienne, the best-selling author, vanished shortly after the book's release.
And her tech guy, boyfriend, Luke Strauss, was the prime suspect. It was a massive media frenzy.
Ethan, though, ever dismissive, just shrugs it off. He says Adrienne's boyfriend probably did it. He pulls Trisha closer, reinforcing his image as the loyal, protective partner.
He says, aren't you glad I saved you from all those jerks? It's a perfect little microcosm of their relationship. He frames himself as the savior from the very dangers that Adrienne chronicled in her book.
The house is a container for secrets, and Trisha senses the entire office is haunted by her presence. But the key to unlocking those secrets isn't supernatural, it's technological.
Obsolete technology, specifically.
A tape recorder, which Trisha spots in a dusty corner, and that discovery moves us into Adrienne's world, into the before.
Now that we've established this terrifying trap that Trisha and Ethan have walked into, let's pull back and explore the woman who set that trap, Adrienne Hale. We're transitioning to her life before the disappearance, focusing on her professional facade and her her ultimate vulnerabilities.
Adrienne is presented as the ultimate professional, a trained psychiatrist and psychotherapist, and she deliberately chose this isolated home in Westchester, making it double as her office.
So she saw the isolation as a source of safety and control.
Which is deeply ironic, given what happens. The very thing she thought would protect her, this isolation, becomes her prison.
She's also intensely judgmental, isn't she? Especially towards people she thinks are making poor life choices. We see it in her internal monologue about her literary agent, Paige.
Yeah, she critiques Paige for rushing marriage and motherhood, even for wearing too much makeup. Adrienne just views the world through this cold, objective lens of diagnosis.
Her professionalism also shows up in her strict boundaries. She has high fees, she refuses to accept insurance, she wants total control over her practice and her clients.
Right, and she dismisses common social niceties. The phrase, "how are you?" is meaningless to her because no one expects or gives an honest answer. This view of social interaction as inherently false allows her to justify her own detachment.
And her professional knowledge is constantly contrasted with her personal blindness. She dismisses Paige's concern that she needs a boyfriend for safety, and she cites that chilling statistic.
Up to 70% of females who have been murdered are killed by an intimate partner.
She intellectually understands the profound dangers of intimacy, but she lets her guard down for a man later in the book. It's a fatal flaw.
She even uses neurochemistry to explain human behavior, referencing fMRI studies that show how the pain of rejection registers in the brain as physical pain. This isn't just trivia, it's setting the stage for how deeply rejection motivates her patients, and eventually herself.
This objective distance brings us to her problem patient, Edward Jameson, or EJ.
Yes. Adrienne quickly and accurately diagnosed EJ with narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. And you have to remember the defining characteristics: a pattern of exaggerated self-importance, a desperate craving for admiration, what psychologists call narcissistic supply, and significantly impaired empathy.
The diagnosis provides the why for everything he does later. EJ doesn't just want material gain. He wants control, attention, and to prove he's superior.
And Adrienne correctly decides she has to terminate the sessions because EJ, true to his diagnosis, lacks any insight or desire to change. Plus, his mother had stopped paying, giving Adrienne a clean, professional way out.
So she tells herself she'll never have to see him again.
Right. And that professional decision, rooted in her confidence, is the precise trigger for the entire chain of catastrophic events that follow. Her certainty fails her because she completely underestimates the vengeful nature of a narcissist who feels rejected.
Okay, let's jump back to the present day, to the discovery Trisha made. The secret recording room. This is the physical location where all of Adrienne's secrets and Trisha's own dark past are stored.
Trisha, following this strong hunch, investigates the office. The hidden room is behind a revolving bookcase, and the trigger for it is pulling out a specific copy of Stephen King's The Shining.
The irony there is just, wow. Using a book about madness and isolation to access a repository of psychological madness.
It's exquisite. And inside, it's a walk-in closet packed floor to ceiling with thousands of cassette tapes. Adrienne, ever meticulous, labeled them with the patient's initials, session number, and date, going back 10 years.
It suggests almost academic intention, maybe for research, maybe for a memoir,
Right.
or maybe for leverage.
Could be any of those. But Trisha's attention immediately narrows in on 3 specific labels. First, PL, the initials of the central trauma survivor from The Anatomy of Fear.
Second, EJ, the narcissistic patient she just terminated.
And third, a special tape labeled simply Luke, who Trisha vaguely recognizes as the tech guy boyfriend, the alleged killer from the news.
This collection of secrets immediately compromises Trisha. She knows more than she should, and she tries to hide her snooping from Ethan, which only deepens the deceit between them. So now let's explore what Trisha learns from that very first tape she listens to. Trisha, driven by this just, overwhelming need to understand the dark history of the house, she finds a PL tape, session number 2, and she is compelled to listen.
And she describes Dr. Hale's voice as simultaneously hypnotic and powerful. This immediately lends immense credibility to whatever is on that tape.
And the tape delivers the narrative centerpiece of The Anatomy of Fear. It's the story of PL Patricia Lawton.
She recounts the worst night of her life at a remote cabin where her fiancé, Cody, and 2 best friends, Alexis and Megan, were brutally murdered by a maniac. PL is the sole survivor.
And she has a nasty stab wound that left a recognizable scar on her belly.
She describes struggling with intense survivor's guilt and this profound paranoia, constantly imagining the killer is still watching her. And this trauma narrative, relayed through the calm, authoritative voice of Dr. Hale, is presented as absolute gospel truth.
Tricia notes that when Dr. Hale says, "You will get better," it sounds like the voice of God himself saying it.
And that's the key. Adrian Hale's authority is the mechanism that manufactures credibility for PL's story, which, as we eventually learn, is nothing more than an elaborate performance, a way to evade accountability.
But while Tricia is immersed in someone else's trauma, her suspicion of her own husband, Ethan, is just growing and growing, fueled by these small, unsettling details.
The detail of the clothes is crucial. Ethan comes back from the shower wearing a Yankees t-shirt and blue jeans that were found in the master closet. Tricia realizes these clothes are way too big for Adrian Hale.
They must have belonged to Luke Strauss, the tech guy who the world thinks murdered Adrian.
And Tricia is immediately unnerved. She wonders which is worse, wearing the clothes of a dead woman or the clothes of the man who allegedly killed her. Ethan, completely oblivious to her internal panic, even suggests Tricia should borrow some of Adrian's clothes too.
This scene just highlights how easily Ethan incorporates himself into the history of the house, regardless of the terrible implications.
And Tricia's unease is compounded by her own secret. She's pregnant.
She's terrified of telling Ethan, especially after she overheard a phone call where his temper just flared violently against an employee. Their initial agreement was to wait 2 years before starting a family, and she is dreading the confrontation.
The moment of truth arrives the next morning, forced by her own body. She gets sick in the kitchen sink and just blurts out the news. She's braced for an argument, for fury, for disappointment.
A reaction consistent with the temper she'd witnessed.
But Ethan's reaction is the second massive instance of cognitive dissonance we get from him. Instead of rage, he is incandescently ecstatic. He holds her hand saying, "That's so great, that's fantastic."
And he claims she was the one who wanted to wait, while he secretly wanted to start a family immediately.
He immediately weaponizes the pregnancy, using it as motivation to buy the house. He says, "I want to fill it with kids." This emotional pivot is just too perfect, too ready. It should immediately signal to you that Ethan is controlling the narrative just as much as anyone else in this story.
Tricia feels a wave of relief, but it is instantly shattered by the mystery of the portrait. She mentions the gigantic portrait of Dr. Hale, which they had taken down the night before, and she comments that she was glad he took it down again this morning.
And this is the point of no return for Tricia's paranoia. Ethan stares at her as if she's gone completely insane and insists he took it down, but absolutely never put it back up.
He condescendingly suggests Tricia is acting so nutty because of pregnancy hormones.
This exchange confirms Tricia's worst fear. Someone else was in the house during the night, moving the painting, confirming their paranoia, and it shows Ethan's immediate move to gaslight her.
The portrait, the focal point of the house, symbolizes Adrian's continued influence, and its movement by an unseen hand proves Tricia is not safe, even with her perfect husband. This realization forces us to pivot back in time, focusing on Adrian's moral decline and the spiraling cycle of blackmail that ultimately consumes her. We return to Adrian Hale's timeline now, tracing the events that led to her disappearance. This is the blackmail cycle, and it begins with an almost comical lapse in the psychiatrist's normally controlled judgment.
Yeah, a petty, violent retaliation over a stolen parking spot.
Adrian is already late and severely irritated. She admits it to herself that she ran a red light, and she cites a study that showed breaking small rules provides a brief sense of freedom and mental health benefits.
A clear rationalization for impulsive behavior.
So when a man in a red Jetta, who we soon learn is EJ, steals her parking spot, she just snaps. She uses the knife she keeps in her purse for protection, an item a paranoid woman might carry to slash his back tire.
It's an act of petty, aggressive vengeance, completely inconsistent with her public persona, and it's a crucial moment for analyzing Adrian's morality. She has crossed a boundary not for survival, but for momentary vengeful satisfaction.
It proves that she, too, is susceptible to that universal moral compromise from the prologue.
And EJ, the brilliant narcissist, was one step ahead. He filmed the whole thing.
He immediately initiates the blackmail. But he doesn't ask for money right away. He demands something far more indicative of his personality: control and attention.
He demands to resume therapy sessions, escalating from weekly to 2 or 3 times a week, stating ominously, "I want you."
The power dynamic just flips dramatically. Adrian, the revered authority figure, is now entirely at the whim of her toxic, formerly terminated patient. The sessions become a source of narcissistic supply for EJ, where he just describes sexual exploits and demands her attention.
Confirming her original diagnosis of his impaired empathy.
The demands inevitably escalate. EJ moves past control and onto material demands, requesting narcotics, specifically a prescription for oxycodone.
30 tablets, 10 milligrams each for phantom knee pain. Adrienne knows this is completely illegal. It risks her medical license, her career, everything she has built her life on.
She manages to negotiate him down a little to 20 tablets of 5 milligrams each, but she yields to the implicit threat. Is losing your license more or less trouble than if a video came out of you slashing someone's tires?
The cost of exposure is just too high, and she gives in.
And this absolute desperation is what leads her to Luke Strauss. He's the handsome IT consultant with a master's in computer science, installing her new, elaborate security system.
He's described as kind, considerate, and as a tragic past a widower, but also a talented former hacker.
Adrienne manipulates Luke with professional precision. She leverages her distress, her vulnerability, and maybe even the first genuine intimate affection she's shown in years to convince him to hack EJ's computer and delete the video.
She sets up the entire scenario meticulously. She drugs EJ with Ativan mixed into expensive Cheval Blanc wine, and then she provides Luke with EJ's unconscious body and his house keys.
Effectively making Luke an accomplice to breaking and entering, if not outright kidnapping.
And here is where Adrienne's intellectual hubris becomes truly chilling. She explicitly references the Stanley Milgram experiment, reminding Luke and us that ordinary people will administer potentially fatal shocks just because an authority figure instructed them to.
She intellectualizes Luke's involvement, seeing him not as a partner, but as a susceptible participant in her plot, coerced by the white coat of authority.
Luke, despite his initial reluctance, goes through with it. But when he comes back, we see a moment of his genuine integrity. Or maybe just his horror. He confesses that he did watch the video. He saw Adrienne's demonic expression. He's appalled. He asks her, "You slashed in some guy's tires. Why would you do that?"
But, in a testament to the powerful hold he has on him, he admits he's actually glad to know she's not perfect, that she's capable of this, and he assures her the evidence is destroyed.
For a fleeting moment, they believe they have successfully defeated the narcissist.
And that victory, as always in this book, is very short-lived. We're moving now into the final confrontation and murder, where EJ proves just how cunning he really is.
Within days, Adrienne gets a text from EJ with a new video. But it's not of her slashing the tire. It's a video of Luke breaking into EJ's house, jimmying open his desk, and hacking his laptop.
He was one step ahead the whole time. He anticipated it and recorded it.
Exactly. And the game changes completely. EJ's new demand shifts from therapy and control to a complete personal subjugation of Adrienne. He says, "All I want is you."
He challenges her to choose between avoiding one night of pleasure and destroying both her career and Luke's life by releasing the video of Luke committing a felony.
Adrienne is completely trapped. She's pushed to the ultimate extreme. She contemplates asking Luke to commit murder, watching his face closely for his reaction.
But Luke is horrified. He immediately storms out, completely unwilling to cross that final line.
And Adrienne realizes two things at once. She's pushed Luke too far, and she has lost the only person she genuinely cared for. She has to handle EJ herself.
This is the moment she turns back to the only other person in her life with a proven capacity for murder and sociopathy, her star patient, PL.
And we get the devastating contents of the final session tape with Patricia Lawton. Adrienne reveals she knows the truth about the cabin murder story. Over 3 years of therapy, Adrienne has cataloged all the inconsistencies.
She correctly surmised the motive. Cody, PL's fiancé, was cheating with her best friend, Alexis. Megan was just an unfortunate casualty.
And Adrienne even knew that Patricia inflicted the stab wound on herself to establish her own victim narrative.
Then comes the ultimate professional betrayal. Adrienne admits to Patricia that she used her trauma story, which she knew was a total fabrication, because it was compelling and it provided the foundation for her best-selling book. She didn't care about the truth, only about the commercial viability of the story.
The power dynamic shifts one last terrifying time. Adrienne, the exposed blackmailee, blackmails the true killer, Patricia, into becoming her accomplice. She threatens to turn her over to the detective who always suspected Patricia in the cabin murders.
And Patricia, facing life in prison, agrees to help Adrienne with her little problem.
This sets up the cold-blooded execution of Edward Jameson. Patricia, performing a character she's clearly played before, lures the drugged and restrained EJ from a casino, drives him back to Adrienne's house, and helps haul him inside.
She's ruthlessly efficient. She checked him out of his hotel, moved his Porsche to a long-term lot, and powered down his phone, ensuring nobody would notice his absence for months.
Adrienne directs Patricia to relocate EJ into the hiding space she knew about, the cavity under the office floorboards. EJ, tied up and drugged, is still conscious enough to be screaming and squirming in pure terror.
The level of clinical cruelty here is just staggering. Adrian uses duct tape to carefully seal the edges of the floor panel, effectively cutting off the oxygen supply. The screams fade to whimpers, then silence.
And she confirms his death with a chilling, detached final thought. Goodbye, Edward.
The aftermath is horrifyingly pragmatic. Adrian notes her relief when the smell of the decomposing body finally goes away after a few months, confirming she just left him there. She then orders a specialized spray advertised to chemically neutralize odors from dead bodies.
Adrian Hale, the master manipulator, has committed cold-blooded murder to protect her reputation in Luke's career. The cycle of deceit has consumed her entirely.
And with that, the two timelines merge into the present day. We return to Tricia and Ethan, trapped in the snow, confronting the devastating and lethal consequences of Adrian and Patricia's crimes. The tension comes to this brutal head when Tricia, unable to contain her curiosity and her dread, watches as Ethan lifts the office floorboards.
And she immediately throws up in the kitchen sink when they reveal the desiccated corpse, a man wearing denim pants and a blue shirt.
This physical reaction triggers a powerful, jarring intellectual realization for Tricia. She remembers a detail from one of Luke's tapes. Adrian hated jeans and would never wear blue ones.
So the corpse is not Adrian Hale.
The body is Edward Jameson. E.J. Adrian murdered her blackmailer and hid him right there in the house.
And this realization is instantly followed by the second massive shock of the day. Luke Strauss, the alleged killer, emerges from the office, tied up with duct tape, tearful, and covered in phlegm.
He claims to have been squatting there.
Luke is distraught and clearly desperate. He denies killing Adrian, saying he was framed and financially ruined. He recalls the media circus. The newspapers called me a murderer. He claims he was just squatting in the house to find out what happened to Adrian, who he genuinely loved.
Critically, he recognizes Tricia by name, presumably from Adrian's patient files or tapes that he accessed while snooping.
Ethan, ever determined to control the narrative, is immediately convinced Luke is the killer and a dangerous threat. He violently tightens Luke's restraints.
And despite the mounting evidence that something far more complex is going on, Ethan decides to abandon Tricia, who is now alone with an alleged murderer, to walk through the blizzard to find help.
But before he leaves, Ethan finds Tricia's secret. He spots the exposed bookcase triggered by the Stephen King book and instantly realizes Tricia has been hiding the tape room. He yanks the door open, sees the thousands of tapes, and he is furious.
Tricia is forced to admit she found it, but lied about listening. And Ethan, already operating under immense stress, forbids her from listening to any more tapes, claiming they should be turned over to the police.
But Tricia senses deep dishonesty in his command. He wants to contain the information, not expose it.
As soon as Ethan is gone, Tricia returns to the hidden room, driven by this primal need for truth, or maybe self-preservation. She grabs the final PL tape, the one she hasn't listened to yet.
And this is the ultimate aha moment, the central narrative explosion of the entire book.
The contents are devastatingly clear. She listens as Dr. Hale exposes PL as the true killer, detailing the cheating motive Cody and Alexis Megan as the unfortunate casualty and the self-inflicted scar.
And then Adrian reveals the blackmail loop, forcing Patricia to help her with the little problem that was EJ.
This is the moment of catastrophic cognitive dissonance that fractures Tricia's reality. She realizes that she is Patricia Lawton. PL. The scar, the trauma story, the sessions, it was all her.
She is the sociopathic survivor of the cabin, Adrian's blackmailed accomplice, and the killer who suffocated EJ. The truth of her primary murderous identity is restored.
Then comes the memory of the ultimate crime, killing Adrienne. Tricia remembers confronting Adrienne after Adrienne, in her hubris, revealed she kept EJ's body in the house. Tricia instantly recognized the body as her own massive, permanent liability.
Her mother's words, a sociopathic mantra, ring true. My mother always says the only way two people can keep a secret is if one of them is dead.
So Tricia killed Adrienne, likely, quickly and efficiently took her keys, and planned to dispose of EJ's body. She was only scared away by Luke's arrival and the sound of police sirens, leaving Luke to be framed for the murder.
Tricia, or rather Patricia Lawton, now fully understands her mission. She married Ethan and came back to this house under the pretense of house hunting specifically to retrieve that final PL tape. The one piece of evidence that would expose her role in 6 deaths. Cody, Alexis, Megan, EJ, Luke, and Adrienne.
This realization transforms Tricia from a nervous newlywed into the calculating sociopath needed for the final act. The stage is now perfectly set for the stunning, ruthless, and terrifying conclusion. Ethan returns from the blizzard, and before Trisha or Patricia can fully process her own catastrophic truth, Ethan confesses his dark secret first.
He needed money. He admits he killed his own mother, Gail Wiley, who, chillingly, was another one of Adrian's paranoid patients.
We know from the GW session tape Trisha had heard earlier that Gail accused Ethan of stealing from her and wishing her dead for the insurance payout.
Ethan reveals the details. He killed her, presumably in a fire, given his description of burning her home and the heat of the fire he still feels. This confirms why he was so cagey about his family history.
He confesses this to Patricia, expressing this deep, twisted love and claiming he was afraid to share his past because she would leave him. He said he needed the money and she was a rotten woman who needed to go.
It's a moment of profound, perverse honesty. Ethan, the perfect husband, is a murderer driven by greed and resentment. And then Patricia reveals her absolute horrifying truth.
She is PL, the cabin killer. She killed Adrian. And she was blackmailed into killing EJ, whose body is under the floor. She confesses to 6 murders.
And what is Ethan's reaction? The man who just confessed to murdering his own mother for insurance money? It is neither horror nor judgment. He absorbs the confession that Trisha killed 6 people, including his resented former therapist, and he becomes completely silent.
The silence is the confirmation.
They are now bound together by mutually understood murderous necessity. They are soulmates forged in shared crime, accepting each other's darkest secrets because they reflect their own. It's a perverse definition of true love.
With their secrets laid bare and their bond cemented, they immediately turn their attention to Luke, still tied up in the office, who they collectively agree must be eliminated. Ethan views Luke as a dangerous person because he killed his girlfriend. A lie Patricia is happy to maintain.
Patricia then admits she murdered Luke outside the house, a joint action, which Ethan completes by slashing his throat. The final description of Luke is chilling. Trisha notes a resigned look in his eyes, suggesting he was finally reunited with his precious Adrienne.
Now, here is where the ultimate layered deception solidifies. The book leaps forward 2 years, presenting the reader with what appears to be a twisted happy ending.
Trisha, now a successful mother with a daughter, Delilah, who is a spitting image of Ethan and expecting a second child, lives in the house, their dream house. They bought it quickly and paid full price to ensure nobody investigated the hidden compartments or the surrounding land.
They have successfully created a suburban bliss built on 7 murders.
And the material manifestation of their bond is chilling. The bodies of Luke Strauss and Edward Jameson are literally buried in the garden, serving as fertilizer for their new life. Trisha notes that Ethan gets nervous when people go near the garden, suggesting the pressure of the secrets is constantly just beneath the surface.
The graves are a permanent, physical symbol of the foundation of their marriage.
But the very final excerpt of the book introduces a new character, shattering the illusion of Trisha's successful life as a devoted wife and mother. We meet Brooke Sullivan, a nurse practitioner, starting a job at Raker Maximum Security Penitentiary.
She's reluctant because she is about to see an inmate she knows from a long time ago, her very first boyfriend, who is serving life without the possibility of parole.
And the final line, the perfect, horrifying twist is this: "And I'm the one who put him here."
This instantly forces you to reconsider the entire narrative, including the scene where Patricia claimed they murdered Luke.
The shocking ultimate truth is revealed. Patricia, having successfully deceived everyone, has adopted yet another new identity, Brooke Sullivan. The man she put here, serving life without parole, is Luke Strauss, whom she successfully framed for Adrian Hale's murder.
This confirms that the earlier scene where they killed Luke and buried him was either a shared delusion they needed to believe to maintain their cover, or perhaps just another layer of narrative misdirection told by Patricia to convince the reader and herself that Luke was permanently eliminated.
The fact that she killed Adrian, framed Luke, and then moved into the house to retrieve the final tape makes her the master conductor of the entire crime.
This is the ultimate act of sociopathic pleasure and control. Patricia Brooke, the original sociopathic killer, is now living the perfect high. Freedom, motherhood, a wealthy husband, and a new job in a maximum security prison where she can watch her first victim, Luke, the man she framed for the rest of his life.
She notes how formal they sound now, like strangers, but that she missed him. She realizes he has been actively trying to see her. This cycle of control is relentless. She framed him, and now she's literally re-entering his life, dressed in the professional uniform of a nurse practitioner, cementing her role as the authority figure who controls his destiny.
It's the perfect ending for a story about universal deceit. Trisha has not only managed to hide her 6 murders, but has successfully transferred the guilt of Adrian's murder onto the man who loved her, and she now uses his continued existence as a source of perverse, controlling gratification.
Wow.
Okay, let's wrap up this episode by summarizing the key takeaways from this incredibly deep dive into Never Lie by Freida McFadden.
The central, unavoidable lesson is that universal deceit isn't just a theme. It's the fundamental operating mechanism of the human experience in this book. Every single major character, the patient, the doctor, the husband, the wife, was either lying or hiding a murder.
And reviewing the psychological concepts is crucial here because they weren't just background details. They were actively weaponized to manipulate and control, leading directly to the crimes.
We saw narcissism personified by EJ. His overwhelming craving for attention, his need for narcissistic supply, led him to prioritize continuous control over Adrian rather than a quick monetary payout. That made him dangerous and ultimately led to his demise.
And Adrian, ironically, became a victim of her own intellectual framework. She used the explicit science of rejection pain to explain her patient's desperation, yet she failed to recognize that her own fear of professional rejection and exposure was powerful enough to drive her to murder EJ.
And most chillingly, she referenced the Milgram experiment to manipulate Luke. This concept proves that people with strong morals can be coerced by an authority figure into destructive acts. Adrian, the authority figure, leveraged her perceived moral superiority to push Luke into becoming a criminal, which ultimately justified Patricia framing him entirely.
It's a terrifying commentary on trusting facades, isn't it? Ethan, the seemingly perfect, loyal, attentive husband who brought flowers, hid the fact that he was a murderer who killed his own mother for inheritance.
And Patricia, the sweet, pregnant wife, harbored a lifetime of calculated sociopathic deception, willing to kill anyone who threatened her life or secrets. The book forces us to reckon with the fact that perfection can easily be the most dangerous mask of all.
We challenge you, our audience, to let the ideas in Never Lie enhance your life by challenging your own assumptions. What secrets are you accepting in your relationships because they seem too perfect to question?
What bad feelings, that initial visceral premonition Trisha had when she first saw the house, are you ignoring because they feel irrational?
True knowledge comes from recognizing the cracks in the foundation. This book shows that a foundation built on shared murder and mutual deceit can, horrifyingly, lead to a perverse kind of success.
The only people who ultimately got away with murder were those who successfully convinced themselves and their partners that their crimes were necessary acts of survival or love.
Which raises our final provocative thought for you to mull over after this episode. Do you think true love can be forged on a shared foundation of murder and permanent, successful deception, as Trisha and Ethan, or should we say Brooke Sullivan and Ethan, seem to genuinely believe? They have built a life on graves. Is that survival, or is that a form of complete psychological collapse?
We encourage you to purchase Never Lie by Freida McFadden to support the author and dive into the full complexity of these twists yourself, and engage with the author on social media and share your theories about the most shocking identity revelation in the book.
Thank you for joining this episode of the Playing Books podcast. Follow, subscribe, and share this episode to help others discover their next essential read. We'll see you on the next deep dive into the world of books.